What is up, kinfolk? So, I'm going to be reviewing a video called The Issue is Race. It's just sitting in my watch later list, so I thought I would go ahead and check it out. I think some of the issues that we were talking about, this is in 1992 or in 2023, I think some of these issues are still going to be prominent today and have gotten worse. But before we get into the video, if you are not subscribed to this channel, I mean, why wouldn't you be? Go ahead, I'm gonna need you to hit that subscribe button because you know it helps your girl out, alright? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video.
Let's begin with a question that may seem a little callous at first, but that increasingly lurks behind the national debate on race and poverty. Morality aside, why should those who don't live in the ghetto care what happens to those who do? Or as the question is sometimes put, if these people, by which white people often mean black people, especially that small minority of young black males, if these people want to trash their community, aren't they just destroying themselves and not the economy as a whole? Now, as a business correspondent, I think of problems in terms of economics, costs and benefits. So to the question, why should we all care, we've performed a sort of crude cost-benefit analysis, starting with an economic benefit who says he could just as easily have wound up a cost. Hollywood's Robert Townsend is the writer, director, and star of Meteor Man, a new film he's now in the process of editing. It's about a reluctant black Superman trying to clean up the inner city.
At this point right here, they're going to lay in, special effects will lay in the meteor behind me. So right now I'm running away from nothing, but...
Townsend grew up in a crime-ridden Chicago housing project. He financed his first film, Hollywood Shuffle, on credit cards.
Cut. Yeah, put those on, please.
On location in the roughest part of Baltimore, Townsend's a clear benefit to the economy.
Jeff, come on!
He's employing hundreds of people here, showing the neighborhood how the film industry works. But he says he could have gone the other way.
Just as I used my smarts to finance a film with credit cards, I could have said, hey man, I could have the biggest drug coke operation in Chicago. I could run this. But I said, no. I can make my own movies. This doesn't look that hard. I'll just take credit cards and make my own movies and get the actors and I'll produce and write and direct it myself. Now I could have used that same sense the other way and you would have been talking, we talk with Robert Townsend, extraordinary drug dealer. Hey, how y'all doing out there? I mean, same thing. I just wanted to say, they caught me this time. I made $1 billion. I was the black Michael Billigan, but hey, I could have been that. So it's a fine line.
It's a fine line, but to his point is it comes down to choices. And dare I say, things have gotten worse because the aspect of being able to shoot, direct, I don't see that happening today in a lot of these neighborhoods because even back then there was a certain sense of community that I think has been lost and a certain sense of humanity that's been lost. I could see somebody, if they wanted to shoot and direct a film on the streets in, let's say, a Chicago, a lot of police would have to be involved. I don't see the community coming out and being behind it and wanting to support it. I don't see you being benefited in that. I see a lot of bad things happening to you potentially. Unfortunately so as well. But to his point, it does come down to choices. He could have easily made the choice to become a drug dealer, but he decided, he had a love for filmmaking, doing it himself, which, I mean, to a lot of people who have grown up in these communities, like, who make it out, a lot of the stuff they did do themselves because they're like, we can't afford to have somebody else do it. So if you do have a dream, if you do have a vision, I definitely believe that you can, hate to use a term, pull yourself by your bootstrap, but you definitely would do a lot better of giving yourself better opportunities in that regard, as opposed to doing something that'll negatively affect you and have you end up in Sing Sing prison.
What do you know how to do?
Rob, steal, and kill.
Where did you get this rob, steal, and kill?
From being out there and seeing it happen. That was the only way people was making it.
At a juvenile prison in Whittier, east of Los Angeles, are kids who wound up on the other side of the line and are now a huge cost to the economy. Americans pay about $35,000 per inmate per year to maintain a prisoner. With blacks constituting half of the country's 1 million prisoners, that's $15 to $20 billion a year right there. The added cost in lost wages is an estimated $100 to $200 billion over the lifetime of these guys, since if past trends hold, Fully half of them will be back in jail within 18 months.
See, when I got out, I left out with the impression that everything was going to be easy. Everything was going to go my way. I was going to get out and be able to get a job, just knock on somebody's door or whatever. But see, when I got out there, reality hit me, and it's like I couldn't really, it was hard for me to find a job, and eventually I gave up and resorted back to the same stuff that I came from.
For so many here, the easiest line of work was a high-paying career in drugs. Now, we spent most of the afternoon with these young men, and the more time we spent, the more clear it seemed that guys like Greg White, given different circumstances, could be a benefit to the economy instead of a cost.
Yeah, there's some soda here.
After an impromptu dinner, we tried to understand why as teenagers they dropped out of school, committed crimes, and wound up as a cost here in prison.
I felt that I needed somebody, a group of peers that were going to encourage me, to boost my self-esteem. Back then, you know what I'm saying? Like when they gave me my nickname. And,
What is your nickname?
My nickname was Maniac.
Maniac?
Maniac. And my what I was thinking about that name, meaning, saying I'm just crazy, lunatic, loped out, that boosted my self-esteem.
Like you said, his name, Maniac, going out doing things to earn up to that name, doing whatever you got to do, have his homies sit around and talk about it, like, yeah, you hear what Maniac did? He won't do one woman. You like, yeah, you sitting back like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want, that reputation, and people to look up to me. That's what I want.
Nothing's changed. I used to work in a tutoring program that worked in a low-income housing project or apartment complex. A lot of those kids were really smart, and there was one kid in particular, his name was Chris, super smart kid, but was put into an anger management school because he was constantly getting into fights. He was constantly in trouble. We taught them how to play chess, and he was our best chess player. We had an incident where Chris ended up throwing a chair, and it accidentally hit a student because he had lost a game. So the anger came out. Afterwards, I had to kick him out. I had to send him home. He was 7 or 8 at the time. He told me basically I could suck his and that he'll beat me up. I got him out of the classroom. I did have to call his mom. And his mom was just irate and talking about like he don't do this and he's just this and I'm always having problems with him. And what was funny is because I was like, ma'am, I'm only reaching out to you because we had this particular incident. But Chris is one of my better students when he's like not picking on the other kids. I'm like, he sits down, he does his work. He was also a mathematician. The dude was fire when it came to math. Whenever I had to clean up, I always told the kids, I'm not your maid and I'm not your mom, so I'm not cleaning up after you. You need to make sure to clean up your stuff. I taught him how to use a vacuum cleaner, so he would vacuum my carpet after once everybody was leaving snack time. Some of the girls would do the dishes, and as a trade-off, I would give them candy. So she's telling me all this. I'm like, ma'am, I don't have these issues with Chris. Honestly, the only reason why I'm reaching out to you is because an accident happened. He was not aiming to hit somebody. It just happened to bounce off the floor, and it ended up hitting a student. That's why I'm calling you. And I told him, like, this is all the stuff he does for me. Like, I'm just telling you, he's just going to be off for a couple days. And she was absolutely shocked. She was like, he doesn't do any of that stuff at home. I'm like, well, that is what I do with the kids. Even to see a kid, when they start doing stuff that is perceived as smart, sometimes the kids will bully them. I think some of that internal stuff is they're not getting it at home, so they try to find it somewhere else. They're not giving that love. They're not giving that attention. They lash out, and it's not the kid's fault. I do blame a lot of the parents. I do blame the environments. If you were giving these kids opportunities in other places where they could shine and be really great, but unfortunately they're in environments and unfortunately they're around people and parents who have their own crap that they got to deal with. Some of them are just neglectful as parents. Some of them are genuinely like, hey, I'm working multiple jobs, so I can't see about this kid. So someone else is going to see about your kid, and they're going to pick up habits, and they're going to pick up things. This is 30 years ago, and this is something that still happens. 31 years ago, to be exact, and this is something that still happens.
When this drive for reputation, headed in the wrong direction, collides with an incendiary event like the Rodney King ruling, you can get the kind of imagery that's become all too familiar.
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace! No justice!
The immediate cost of scenes like this is obvious, but the long-term economics are far worse, according to Peter Ueberroth.
You'd have to start it with a T, not a B for billion, a T for trillion. If the United States of America can't make the racial mix work, our ability to compete globally goes right down the rat hole. So the cost, I mean, it's almost not worth adding them all up because it's so disastrous.
I mean, currently Chicago is under siege. I know LA is having their issues. Back in 2020, I'm from the Bay Area, so we had our little run-in of people doing crazy stuff. It's not just when you have these massive events like this. Some of it, even to a certain extent now, which is unfortunate, it is becoming socially acceptable to do some of these things. It's the same exact thing with Walmart leaving the community. The economy, and have the economy of these communities going, you want them to do well, of course. But as a business, if it starts hurting you, why would I want to put my business here when I could potentially get robbed, when these communities are burning down these places? And it's not all these people, of course. It's always a small minority. But if you have a small minority of people who are constantly coming in here and robbing the joint, and now I have to pay for security, which is also taking out. And even when it comes to security, they're limited in terms of they can't make arrests. They can only report. The cops aren't doing anything. This is just a powder keg of bad stuff happening. In the case of Walmart, there are going to be a lot of people who now have to travel 10 plus minutes just to get their groceries because of a lot of bad things happening all at once in their community. This is a $1 trillion problem back in the day, but I'm pretty sure it's like trillions of dollars today.
Paul, we're in what used to be the garden center of the former store here.
This was a Sears.
That's right. That's what these...
Roger Stangland is CEO of the Vons supermarket chain, which plans to open a dozen stores, create more than 1,000 jobs, starting on this site in Inglewood. They've already hired a black construction company to clear the site. But the problem is, most work here won't pay as well as the tens of thousands of factory jobs that have fled town in the past decade. Vons will provide a lot of low-wage service jobs, like bagging groceries, that few of us want to take, including the young men in prison, whose immediate prospects are jobs like cleaning offices or flipping the proverbial burgers.
Job as McDonald's or a janitor is not going to support you, though. Not comfortably. You still gonna have to struggle with that job as a janitor or at McDonald's. So therefore, we want to live comfortably, so we chose the route of selling drugs to keep money in our pockets so we won't have to struggle.
We seen Joe Blow down the street with a Mercedes-Benz on Gold Lorenzo's high signing with a gang of girls around him. The American dream. That's what we seen. It ain't how you get the money as long as you got it. You know, we see people go to school, get their little high school diploma and be slaving at McDonald's or somewhere. Like, man, I don't want that. School can, put that behind somewhere.
There's a sense of delayed gratification that I think a lot of people are turned off by the idea of college, because it does require you to have to start out from the bottom, such as like burger joints and all this stuff. But the idea of college back in the day, and I still think today exists, but you have to be smarter about it, because back in the day you could just have a college degree and get access to a lot of different jobs, whereas now just having a degree is not enough. But it allows you options. At the end of the day, college just allows you options. When you don't have a college degree, you have options, but it's just going to be a hard road, and in some cases maybe even a harder road than if you were to just, once again, delay gratification and go into something like, I would say, STEM, going into hard blue-collar jobs, real estate, and all these other things. So, and even that requires a sense and a level of education and a level of delayed gratification, because when you just come out of real estate, you're not selling houses like that. You know what I mean? And time is of the essence in these scenarios, too. I think a lot of men see, okay, well, this takes time, and a lot of us don't even see ourselves making it to being 24, 25. That's old in our neighborhoods. Like, most people are dying. So why would I spend my time and not to mention, I know a guy who was doing all the right things, but he ended up dying. So why should I concern myself about the future when the future doesn't even look bright for my own self? Why should I even care to even invest in that part of myself?
Why wouldn't you take a job, or when you were on the outside, they'd say, hey, I'm not going to take a low-level job. I see the BMW.
The hell with them.
What?
The hell with them. If they're not going to take a low-level job, that's where you start.
That's right.
Everybody in America starts. And I hear you say take the hamburger flipping jobs out. You know what happens if you take the $5 an hour jobs away from the community? the $9 an hour jobs drop to 5.
That's right.
And the 14s drop to 9, and the whole economic base goes away.
But low wages aside, the very fact of a job is critical, according to Bernard Kinsey.
Because the notion of having a job is more important than even a paycheck, because it causes you to get up in the morning, it teaches you life skills, it teaches you interpersonal skills, it teaches you math skills, it teaches you the whole notion of work, which is a very socializing kind of process.
Most new businesses fail. Moreover, training kids like this is very expensive. On the other hand, like it or not, we're all playing on the same economic team. So if we don't invest in our teammates now, what's it going to cost us later?
You can pay me now or you can pay me later means that you could invest the money in the future of these kids that are growing up, these young minds. They're not all corrupt. You know, no one is born, they're born babies. They're not born corrupt, and this one's going to be a criminal, I can tell. You know, or we don't have to invest, and those same kids that could have been given a chance will come back and see you again, and it'll be under circumstances that you don't want to see them under.
The last word goes to Professor Harry Edwards, a sports sociologist who studied these issues for years.
We raid the business schools, bring in the most brilliant minds, put billions of dollars behind it to deal with Russia, but when it comes down to dealing with South Central and inner city, we want to bring in ball players. I'm saying that we must begin to look seriously at these problems, because here we're not talking about saving the Soviet Union. We're talking about Americans saving America, and that's what's at stake here, not just South Central.
Well, of course, the Russians have nuclear weapons.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're a lot more threatened by the chaos and disruption and instability and the tremendous financial cost of the situation that we have going here inside of this country than anything that anybody might muster on the outside, nuclear power or not. We're more likely to collapse from the inside than we are to be destroyed from the outside.
Facts. This is where I say give these people opportunities. Like, most businesses fail, but most drug dealers are entrepreneurs. They have to know how to market. They have to know their customers. They're knowledgeable of the law. So, I mean, would be great lawyers. Knowledgeable of business and business strategies for customers and consumers. So, great businessmen. The actual process of making the drugs. You could talk about how they could be into the pharmaceutical industry. Personally, throwing money at the issue, though they're talking about economics, is not necessarily going to fix the problem. I think, if anything, teaching people, and I mean, it costs little to nothing to teach somebody something, but having knowledge is literally what's going to get you out of these situations. And a lot of people, when it comes to this stuff, they don't know how to, so they fall back on what is the thing that I see all the time. What I see is the person who is the drug dealer with all the girls, has a nice coat on, has all the expensive jewelry, and he's rolling down my street, and he's living where I live. So he didn't go to college. And my homie who just went to college, down at the burger joint, flipping burgers. Hindsight is crazy, because you know, you'll be looking down at that square who's going to school, getting an education, who is flipping burgers at McDonald's, but then when he graduates, he now is in a suit and tie, and you only see him when he's coming home to visit his mom. Or better yet, he has enough money to move his mom out of that neighborhood, and when people talk about, hey, whatever happened to so-and-so, he's like, well, he got a good job, got a wife, kids, got his mom out. Folk, if you made it this far, go ahead and like the video and leave me some comments down below. How do you feel about this? And do you feel like things have gotten better, or if they've just gotten worse for our country? And what are your solutions to this? Because I think that is the biggest important piece. But as always, kinfolk, you know I love you, and I will see you in the next one.